Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to FMA Discussion. This is episode 352, and today we have Maestro Luis Preto, and he's going to be talking about Portuguese stick fighting. He's going to be a bunch of downloads, so he's going to actually we're going to be showing basically some of his blocks, parries, strikes, how they kind of play around sparring, and some of the multi. So if you're sticking around, tell us where you're watching from, smash that like button, and without further ado, I'm going to be bringing him up.
Hi there.
Hey, again, I want to thank you for coming on. I always like to, initially when I was doing all these episodes, I kind of stayed within the FMA lane. But then as time went on, I got exposed, seeing different stick arts around the world. And, so we've been branching out. Like we've covered Irish stick fighting, Eskrima Criolla, Argentine, and now we're covering you. So I'm looking forward to this. It's great looking at systems that I'm not really familiar with, and I think a good part of the FMA community is not familiar with. So, So again,
Yeah, that surely makes me feel welcome. Thank you. Thanks very much.
oh yeah, 100%. So, I guess before we jump into it, like, what was your initial martial arts background before you got into this?
So initially, as a kid, I began by practicing karate. I did it from the age of 9 till 18.
Mm.
18, 19, 20. At the age of 18, I experienced Jogo for the first time. And so for a couple of years, then I went back and forth practicing Jogo and karate. But then at the age of 20, 21, then I decided to literally stick with Jogo Power.
So I guess my question is like, what captivated you? Like, what really spoke to you as far as the system that you wanted to go deeper into it?
I would say that the main things that captivated me were it had it offered the possibility to practice combat against multiple opponents with
Mm.
real life training partners, unlike the thing I had experienced in karate, in which the katas were all just trained against imaginary opponents. And so
Yeah.
within Jogupao, we do have some katas that we call forms, but then like the majority of training is undertaken by practicing with real life training partners. And so that really motivated me. And then also, I would say uh, the same overall concept within the practice of dueling. We also use within the practice of dueling one-on-one combat.
Mm.
I also really enjoyed that the same thing that most of the practice was with a real life training partner. But on top of that, um, not only did it entail practicing drills, but also free playing with a training partner every single day. And so while my previous experience with striking arts was that they were mostly drill based,
Really.
and I would look around and I would see that grappling arts offered the possibility for people to free play on a much regular basis. I found that in Jogo Pau. In Jogo Pau and within the training environment I was lucky to be exposed to. We had trainees of different levels, and so the less experienced ones would get matched up with the more experienced ones,
Mm.
and that enabled us to fairly safely experience free play every single training session, and I found that very, very, very alluring.
Yeah, I can see that, right? I mean, I think a good chunk of us started in traditional arts. I was Taekwondo, and then I saw the first UFC, and I'm like, it's time to change gears. You know what I mean? Like, I just, yeah. So, and then via JKD was exposed to FMA, and yeah, it's much similar to your circumstances and journey. It just that stuff just really spoke to me. You know what I mean? Like just the combative nature, competitiveness, like you mentioned, like live students actually contesting you, and
Yeah.
and just all the
Yeah.
above. So, great.
And the thing was that as a kid, I was lucky to be exposed to the practice of table tennis for many, many years.
Mm,
And within table tennis, I didn't have one single instructor. I didn't have one single formal training lesson, learning lesson, learning experience. So I've never practiced like a single drill in table tennis while experiencing table tennis. We simply played, and everything was natural. And so and then suddenly, eventually, I began realizing that I wasn't even on most occasions I wasn't even aware how I performed stuff.
mm,
I would simply look at the ball. I would simply have the goal of placing the ball on the other side of the table and in such a manner that the opponent couldn't get to it. And by simply having this goal and looking at the and following the trajectory of the ball, my upper limb, as if it had a brain of its own, it would move as needed to strike the ball as it needed to be hit on each individual occasion. And so, like for several years, I thought about this, and I was like constantly thinking, like, dude, like you just like play, you just experience play within table tennis and
mm,
everything. Obviously, like after several years of practice of playing around with it, but still after several years, everything comes out naturally. While
mm,
within this martial practice, focused on one's proprioception, focused on one's internally on one's conscious awareness and control of one's body segments, things don't come out naturally.
mm,
And initially I even pondered the hypothesis that okay, it's just me and an individual thing. It's just me who I'm not meant to practice martial arts. I'm not inclined to be good at them. But I would look around and like most of my training partners sucked big time as much as I did, and so and the few that didn't suck so much were the ones who actually competed on a regular basis and experienced free play on a regular basis. And so I was like, okay, so I'm starting to connect the dots. And so, and then as I started to connect the dots, I was lucky to experience Jogo um, within this specific setting that was based on real life training, on drills with real life training partners. And the thing is, and what do I mean by this? I mean that like even if the instructor wants the trainees to practice just one specific strike and its corresponding parry, and if you're doing it with the real life training partner, even if the training partner wants to perform that one strike every single time in the same manner with the same angle with the same speed, he won't be able to do that. And so you will always face variability
mm,
when training with a real life training partner, even if for some reason the drill is to focus exclusively on one single technique, on one single strike, and one single parry. You will always have to adjust the parry slightly in terms of angle or in terms of speed, the reaction time with which you exit, and all that stuff. And so I found that it made sense. Empirically, it made sense. It matched my previous success practice experiencing table tennis, and so I trusted that process, and I haven't regretted it because it didn't let me down.
nice. Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, I mean, well said. So far as I guess let's say your instructor. So I guess we'll do two-part question. How
Yes.
old is the system, like far as history goes, historically speaking? How old is the system, and what can you tell us about your instructor, as far as the lineage, I guess, is concerned?
Yeah, I understand. So I'm not really sure how old Jogo is. Like there are
Mhm.
records dating back a few centuries,
Okay.
um, but uh, but that's as far as it goes, I believe. But at the same time, like you've got older written sources of medieval knight arts, like sword art,
Mm.
in which the description, the names of the strikes and the descriptions of the strikes and of the tactics to employ against multiple opponents, they match with what with the things that we practice nowadays. And
Okay.
so, like the main difference between swinging a weapon as we do, between doing it with a stick and with a sword, is that like for example, for multiple opponents there is absolutely no difference. And within the HEMA community, the historical
Mm.
European martial arts community, nowadays you have people focusing exclusively, or for the most part, I believe, on the montante, which is like the really long sword, like a meter and a half, 5 foot long sword.
Okay.
And from the videos that I've come across online, they focus, or the sources that they focus on, are about the montante being used for multiple opponent combat. And so within multiple opponent combat, like if you're surrounded with people, you cannot perform just like one linear strike against one guy. You need to swing the weapon in order to almost simultaneously push away multiple opponents. And so the tactical constraints of this combat scenario force you to perform exactly the same swinging motions in outnumbered combat, whether you are wielding a sword or a stick. Within
Mhm.
one-on-one combat, within dueling, the difference between the two weapons is the existence or absence of a crossguard. And with us, since we don't have a crossguard, and so there is absolutely no safety net to protect the hands,
Mm.
there is absolutely no physical shield to protect the hands.
Mm.
This forces us to be more careful defensively, and which translates into fighting at at a wider distance.
Okay.
We react defensively. We look to react defensively in such a manner in terms of distance management, in such a manner that allows us to parry with the mid portion of our weapon, with the mid portion of what would be the blade, the portion of our weapon that is in front of our lead hand, what would be a blade in a sword. We look to parry with the mid portion of the weapon so as to ensure that we are at such a distance that our lead hand is pretty safe. Um, and and so um, there is the possibility, the hypothesis that medieval sword fighting is connected to stick fighting, at least from a technical and tactical standpoint. It looks that
Makes
way.
sense.
But
Yeah.
but but in terms of like jogo do pau, like when did people start practicing jogo do pau, and when did they start calling it jogo do pau? My belief is that no one really knows for sure. What I do know is that martial arts, I believe, are initially born out of the need to to for people to protect themselves, like for self-defense, and therefore the art sprang out of the need to fight mostly multiple opponents, and
Mm.
that's why Jogo do Pau is focused and on around swinging strikes, exactly because of the tactical constraint that I just mentioned of needing to push away multiple opponents that are standing in front of you when you happen to be surrounded. Because once you transition from outnumbered combat to one-on-one combat, then in one-on-one combat, you're just it's just you and the guy standing in front of you. And
Mm.
in this case, my instructor I lost count. I lost count of the number of times that I heard my instructor say that within one-on-one combat, if you consider that Jogo do Pau is 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 about the performance of swinging rotational movements, then within dueling, within one-on-one, Jogo do Pau ends where the thrust begins. Within
With
dueling,
one,
a
oh,
person,
when the thrusting becomes into play. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
within one-on-one combat, if you manage to become an expert thruster, then like you don't need anything else.
Mm.
Um, and but basically going back to answering your questions. So Jogo do Pau was sprang out of the need and desire to develop a system to fit the multiple opponent combat scenario. And for the most part, initially, that's what people practice because people mostly live in rural environments.
Rural
And
area.
so, yeah, and then within rural environments, people would walk around with long walking sticks. And
Mm.
so, since they had the tool available, they made use of it when needed, and for this specific circumstance of fighting multiple assailants, multiple opponents. Then it was they probably then fooled around a little bit with one-on-one dueling,
Mm.
one-on-one combat, but like as a secondary thing. And then it was when probably around the Industrial Revolution, when people started migrating to the big cities for economical reasons, that were in these urban environments, people stopped walking around with long staffs, long walking
Right.
staffs, 5 foot long staffs. And so they could well have simply stopped practicing Jogo Pau, but they continued practicing Jogo Pau as a leisure activity. And within this leisure activity scenario, then they began focusing on one-on-one.
Mm.
My instructor is from Lisbon, was born and raised in Lisbon, which is the capital of Portugal. And so when he was initially exposed to Jogo de Pau, he was exposed to dueling. And so he started training, trained with uh, Master Pedro Ferreira, who was at the time, which was in the 1960s. He was at the time the most well-respected instructor in Lisbon, but he was actually initially from the north. He had been born and raised in the north part of Portugal in Melgaço, which is just very close to the border with Spain up north. And then one day, my instructor, Master Nuno Gusso, he asked his instructor if this system didn't allow for people to learn to fight multiple opponents. And so his instructor told him that yes, that there was such a skill set within the art.
Mm.
He himself had practiced a bit of it when he was young. He still remembered a few things, but he didn't consider himself an expert in it. And so he taught him those few things that he remembered, but then he advised him on who he should train with in order to learn that additional skill set of fighting multiple opponents. And then my instructor traveled multiple times to the northern part of Portugal to learn with the individuals who at the time were regarded as the most knowledgeable people in that
Mm.
specific skill set.
Nice. Oh, wow. Wow. And then that's cool. Okay. So you kind of went into the methodology, which was great.
Mhm.
So basically, longer stick, walking stick, primarily based on multi-man attack. When
Yeah.
you get into just dueling with one-on-one, thrusting becomes key. And then when it transcended to the city, the Industrial Revolution, economics, is it fair to say it became shorter, cane-like?
Yeah, and then, for example, my Master Pedro Ferreira, my instructor's main instructor, he was a driving instructor, and so as a driving instructor, he would carry around a walking cane in his car,
Mm.
uh, just just in case. And as he began doing so, then they started fooling around with the idea. of studying how they could transfer the system that they practiced from long double-handed weapons to shorter single-handed weapons. So they started fooling around with the idea, but then but they never really invested. They would they never really invested an awful lot in that type of study. But then my instructor did so, and he was the one. And so within Jogo do Pau, you only have one school, which is my instructor's school, that includes both the practice of long two-handed weapons and shorter single one-handed weapons. All the other schools, to my knowledge, continue focusing exclusively on the traditional stuff.
The two
But my
hand.
instructor, since he was a person who lived in Lisbon, in a city, and he was also always very self-defense oriented, he did undertake the task of studying how to transfer one thing to the other, and yeah, he did so, and quite well, to my knowledge. Yeah.
Wow. So he actually evolved the system. I mean, that's fantastic. I mean,
Yeah, quite a
yeah.
bit. Yeah.
Wow. Good on him. So was it well received as far as him incorporating the shorter stick?
No. Within the Jogo to Pau community at large, it was
Wow.
never well received. No, it,
I had a feeling.
and it's yeah, it's always the same thing. It's always the same thing. It's not traditional. Like the
Yeah.
traditional thing is the staff, and so it's like whatever. It is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, here it is. I mean, I can understand from the traditional standpoint, authenticity, the integrity of the system. However, though, for people who do live in the city, they're not going to be able to carry around a 5 foot staff easy around their car and all that. So, yeah.
You're preaching to the choir, and especially in my case because on top of my experience experience practicing martial arts, then I also decided to study sports. I have an undergrad and two graduate degrees in sports sciences, and so given everything, given what I am as a person, and then also this specific
Mm,
training I receive at the university uh, upon studying sports sciences, I've, I tend to think conceptually. And
yeah.
so, like, I think about distance management,
Mm,
reaction time, uh, tactical analysis of of your opponent's strengths and weaknesses, and so I don't need much to think big picture. But when on top of that, I even start thinking about like the actual toolkit, the actual skill set, and when I remove all the nonsense and I get left with like the critical factors,
yeah.
like a critical factor of distance management,
Mm,
it's like which art in the world has exclusive copyrights to the concept? Who doesn't? Like everyone practices distance management, and so and like and so if one thing that will dictate your effectiveness within combat is distance management, like who cares if you're practicing it with a 5 foot staff or a 4 foot staff or a 3 foot staff? Like
right.
and so like you can be practicing the if you're practicing it like properly and like with effectiveness with a 3 foot staff, you end
Mm,
up being more traditional than someone who is practicing with a 5 foot staff but improperly and with it and then having unsuccessful distance management ability. And so it's like whatever, but
yeah.
some people like to focus on the aesthetics, and in this
Mm,
case, on the length of the staff. Personally, I prefer focusing on skills, and that's why uh, and on critical factors, and so that's why I never rejected a single opportunity to train anyone. And so
Yeah.
I've trained historical European martial artists. I've trained FMA people. I've trained
Mm.
Sistema people. I've trained karate people. Like people come to me and they want to learn a little bit more about weapon combat. I teach them weapon combat, and so it's like because my two main concerns are one for people to experience a martial
Mm.
practice that they enjoy, and for them to develop functional, effective martial skills while they experience an enjoyable martial training setting. And so I focus on enjoyment and functional martial skills, and I don't care about labels.
That's great. I mean, right. As long as they have fun and they're getting something functional, God forbid they had to use it and defend themselves. I mean, how can you
Yeah,
argue
yeah,
that? I mean, that's
yeah. But other people who prefer to focus on aesthetics, they will. It's their thing,
yeah. If it makes them
and
happy,
they have the right to do so. Yeah,
yeah, sure. You know what I mean? If yeah, and that I totally agree with that. Hey, if it makes you happy and
yeah,
motivates you, then who's anybody to say what you should or shouldn't do? So
yeah.
as far as so is it fair to say it's pretty much all blunt weapon translation as far as the system is concerned, right? Nothing.
Yeah, like I sent you one of the videos I sent you was what with the bladed stuff, and so like in the old days when people practice the Jogo within rural environments,
Mm.
then they started adding a blade to the tip of the weapon, so as to make the weapon more dangerous as
Mm.
they were swinging it, because basically like within outnumbered combat your goal, at least within Jogo Pau, your goal is not to send everyone to the hospital. It's like if you're facing two, three, four, five, even 10 opponents, then if they are as skilled or even more skilled than you and they outnumber you, then it's just a matter of time until you get defeated. And so your goal is to run away.
Yeah.
But you may be in a situation where in which you're not able to run away. You only have like, for example, one path to run away, and they are blocking your access to that path or whatever. And so, as you look to get to that path in order to run away, you need to engage them somehow in order to avoid getting hit. And so, basically, the principle is very simple. If you just stay put on the same spot and different people attack you from different directions, and for example you have two three strikes reaching you at the same time, but you only have one weapon, and so you parry yourself eventually from one of the strikes, but then you get hit by the second or the third or the fourth, and so but you have two defensive tools. You have your weapon, your blocks, and you have distance. And so what
Mm.
you do is you steal the initiative, and so you preemptively strike your opponents. And when you strike your opponents, you move towards one opponent, or you move in a certain direction. And so, and if
Mm.
that in that direction there is one opponent or two or three, you move towards that one or two or three opponents. And by doing that, you either block any incoming strike that you are approaching, or you simply prevent those opponents you prevent those opponents from striking by forcing them to go on defensive. And since you are approaching them, you are distancing yourself from the remaining opponents. And so, if
Mm.
someone was simultaneously attacking you from behind, you avoid getting hit by stepping outside of that strike's distance,
Okay.
uh, that strike's reach. And then after stealing the initiative with the first strike, you immediately follow through and immediately move in a different direction. And so you are always on the move. And so obviously it ends up being much more tiring for the person fighting the multiple opponents than for the one standing on the than for the group.
Mm.
But nothing's perfect, and so one more reason for you to engage them for only as long as you need to in order to run away as soon as you can. But while you have to engage them, what you are looking to do is you're looking to preemptively strike your opponent in different directions, and always moving with your strike towards someone, so that you are simultaneously able to put that person you are approaching on the defensive, and simultaneously step away from other opponents who might be striking at the same time. And then you do this as randomly, and as you switch the direction of your movement, you try to do so as randomly as possible, so that they aren't able to anticipate where you're heading next, and so you always get them, keep them on the defense. But then, of course, as you are doing that, if anyone who is part of the group of assailants who are attacking you, if any of them happens to make a mistake, then you make use of that mistake, and you hit a hand here, or a head there, or a knee there, or whatever.
No, okay. So actually, I think this is a good time as any to pull this up, because one of the ones I pulled up was you talking about the multi aspect of this, and so
Mm-hmm.
what is it? What's going on? I don't know why it's are you able to see okay? I don't know why it's having hiccups here.
I'm not seeing any video now.
Yeah. Let me just see what is going on here. That should be coming right up. Let me see. All right. Let's try it again. All right.
You will go 1.
Here we go.
If
You
it
see this?
happens to be the division on the right and watches first,
Nope.
you will go
Are you able to see it,
1
Luis?
and 2. Just
No.
as we were doing beforehand. So again,
Folks, let me know in
approaching
the
with
comment
this technique as a
section
side
if you
lead.
can see
1
this.
and 2. And now in this case, the opening is on this side. 3,
Let me see if
4,
they can see
and
it.
5,
I'm able to see
and
it,
6.
but
And change again. 1, 2, 3, 4.
with the comments,
1,
let's
2,
see.
3, and 4. 1, 2.
But basically, what I'm showing you is
And so forth.
basically what you were speaking on. You're going at them and then the moving and all that.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know why it's breaking up. It shouldn't be. Yeah, somebody's watching. Let me know if you can see this. So that was all right. So we just played that. I'm just waiting to see if somebody mentioned if they were able to. I'm gonna play it again though.
So did anyone see it?
I'm just waiting for somebody to comment. Yeah, folks, let me know if you were able to see that. I'm going to play it again though.
You will go 1. If it happens to be the division on the right and watches first, you will go 1 and 2. Just as we were doing beforehand. So again, they are
Pretty good
approaching with
analysis.
this
Basically
technique as a
everything
side
that you
lead.
spoke on
1
is pretty
and 2. And now in this case, the opening is on this side. 3, 4, and 5, and 6. And change again. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so forth.
I don't know what is going on here. I don't know if there's like a glitch. Okay, that was yes, but not the screen. So all right, so you're able to hear it, but okay, yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with that. You guys should be able to see it. That should have came through. Let me. All right, I'm gonna play with this while you're talking, but so based on that and all that, so I guess at what point did you start that you wanted to teach this, and I guess, and when were you given the blessing to do so?
Uh, when did I want to teach this? Um, Basically, I would say that I began teaching this out of my own selfish desire to have more training partners to practice with.
That's usually what
Uh,
happens.
yeah. Although I also really enjoy teaching because, like, I've met some people who also started teaching and teach and perhaps still teach uh, due to that same motivation of wanting, needing more training partners to train with, but 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 they really don't enjoy doing it. So they do it just because really they have to. But in my case, it was a mixture of both. Like I wanted to have more training partners, but on top of that, for some reason, I've never really analyzed it. But for some reason, I always really enjoyed the experience of teaching as well.
Okay.
Uh, as for blessing, uh, I don't know. I, that was never really the case because the thing is that even within my time practicing with Master Russo, on a regular basis, we would have classes with folks of different levels. And
Okay.
so, and when this happened, which was quite regularly, quite common, um, he would make use of his top level students to teach alongside him and like as assistants. And so, for example, if we were to train for 3 hours, like we would know that the last hour would be dedicated just for the advanced students. But for example, the first 2 hours, the first hour would be for the for the beginners, and the second hour for the intermediate ones. And so, and instead of having uh, every single beginner and everyone just practicing the same thing, he understood from a very early from a very young early time. He understood that training needed to be individualized. He needed to be tailored to each individual
Mhm.
for it to stand a chance of being successful. And so he would make use of his top level students in order to as assistants in order to deal with groups of beginners with beginners or intermediates with very different training needs. And so he himself would get us to teach, and so then us teaching even other people outside of our regular gym would be just like an extension of what we were already experiencing with him. And so there was never really a moment where he that in which we needed to ask him for his blessing because he himself was stimulating that.
Mm. Okay. Nice, nice. And how old when you start teaching?
Probably 2021. I had
Oh,
already started teaching karate a few years earlier when I was still doing it. But as for Jogo do Pau, yeah, as for Jogo do Pau, I believe I was around 21, 22, yeah, probably.
yeah, that's pretty for wow. So you were official Jogo DePauw teacher at 21. That's pretty impressive. What is there a ranking structure? Like I mean, is it kind of go like beginner, intermediate, or is there any type of ranking structure or no?
Yeah, yeah, like when my instructor began training, nothing was really systematized. You would just go to a training session
Mhm.
and you would free play with an instructor, and the instructor then like while free playing he would go like, oh, okay, I would have hit you now you made this mistake because I would have hit you now in this manner,
Okay.
but or they would actually hit them, but then they wouldn't follow through with a specific drill in order to correct that thing. Then they would just like continue free playing, and hopefully, by experiencing many hundreds and thousands of hours of free playing, then like you would start getting it increasingly better and better. But then it was as my instructor started because my instructor himself had also began his martial journey through karate. Then he had experienced like a formal training setting with while practicing martial arts, and so
Mm.
then he sought to bring that into Jogo, and he also sought to systematize the technique. And so he sat down with his instructor, and he told him that he would like to systematize everything, the technique and the tactical options in
Okay.
writing. And his instructor, Master Pedro Ferreira, indulged him. And so as a result, my instructor, Master Russo, together with his main training partners of the time, his main friend buddies at the time, they managed to like put everything in writing, and
Mm.
so they put together like a technical program, a content, systematized content analysis of Jogo, um, which later on, given given the overall given the overall culture
Mm.
around surrounding martial arts, then this written systematization was broken down into levels, and so and then like and also to help out instructors for instructors to have an overall guide to fall back on, or to have as as an initial base. And so on, like this overall document that
Okay.
systematized everything into level one, level two, level three, level four. Yeah, but then ultimately, yeah, and it was a really breakthrough moment, and it really helps out people who who they might love the art, but like they have other jobs, they have jobs, and they have families, and they have all
Yeah.
this stuff, and then they don't have the time, so either the motivation or just the time and mental energy to really
Yeah.
focus on the art in order to rediscover the wheel by themselves. And so it's a really nice support system to have. But then ultimately, the more you teach and the more experienced you become, then you stop really needing such a document. You just and then you even start coming up with your own systematizations based on all the teaching experiences that you have, and yeah,
Yeah.
all the different people that you teach.
So current, I mean, status quo. Like I know, obviously you're in Portugal. Do you have like reps, quote, I guess, so to speak, in other countries that are
Right?
under you, or mhm,
Do we have what? Sorry.
representatives that are teaching under you in other countries?
I believe so. I'm not really engaged in that, but I believe that there are a few people teaching abroad. Yeah,
Yeah, outside of
not
Portugal. Okay.
not ma- not many. I believe there are few and far, very few, but I believe they do exist. Yeah.
Yeah, just be interesting, just as far as the spreading of it and all that. And
Personally, I do have one very good martial artist and very close friend in Germany called Patrick Scheller, and he practices both Shogu Pao and historical European fencing,
okay,
German longsword. And so I know that in Germany, Patrick Scheller, who lives in around Nuremberg, he, he teaches both HEMA, historical European fencing, and Jogo Pao. I
Jogo.
believe there are a few other, but I believe there are a few other people abroad who also teach it. But yeah, but so far very few.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's I think it's over time, people see this interview and all that. I mean,
Oh, sorry, I was forgetting. I believe you know Dragan Milojevic
oh yeah,
from
yeah, yeah.
Serbia. Yeah, so he's also a close friend of mine, and I spent. I was very lucky to be able to spend 2 years in Belgrade, 2 months in Belgrade, um, teaching him. And yeah, so we really drilled it for a couple of months period. And he's
Okay.
also I know that he's into a bunch of stuff, mostly
Yeah.
FMA,
Yeah.
But he does have a knowledge base that includes quite a bit of knowledge of Jogo, yeah, as well.
Oh, good. Yeah. Matter of fact, he actually sent a question in, and all that, which we're going to get to. So, um, but far as you, are you still, despite COVID and what's going on, are you still actively teaching it and have regular classes?
No, I never really had regular classes.
Okay.
Um, yeah, no, I never really had regular classes. Like I was never seduced by the idea of expanding the art.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay. All
I,
right.
yeah, yeah. I've never really put much effort into that. It was I never perceived the promotion of the art and the expansion of the art as my mission.
Yeah.
My driving motivations have been first to try to make sense of the art, make sense of the skill set, and then to be able to also make sense of how to train it effectively.
Okay.
And as a result, I look to put together learning material, so far mostly books, in order to convey my thoughts, my findings with other people, so that other people are able to to teach and to train and to teach themselves. I've even developed like a do-it-yourself training method that people can easily follow in order to learn to teach themselves jogo de pau.
Yeah, which we're going to
And
get
so
into because I mean,
yeah,
from my understanding, you've written some books on that. How many books have you written thus far on it?
I probably wrote like seven books. So I believe. Yeah.
That's all. That's excellent because um, so his question kind of parallels mine. And incidentally, Dragon's here, so he just said
Mm.
hello. All right, so his question is, which I'm going to pull up right here. Okay, with so many books and videos produced, in which order should a person approach studying from there if the goal is functional sparring skill?
Um, uh, like from all the books that I wrote currently, not all of them are available. Are being still printed by Amazon. But from the ones that are available, the thing is that if you practice both multiple opponents combat and single opponent combat, you can understand. You can come to an understanding of how the skill set evolved and how the
Okay.
skill set evolved from autonomous combat to dueling.
Okay.
But if you don't really value, at least as a main motivation, if you don't really value um, uh, get reaching that type of historical cultural understanding of the system,
Yeah.
then the two skill sets, the skill set of ultimate combat and the skill set of dueling, are completely independent. You can practice just outnumbered combat, or you can practice just dueling. You don't need to practice both. And given that the art began with outnumbered combat, given that outnumbered combat really is the thing that mostly fits the need for self-defense. And with it, I would advise people to start with that. And it was under this perspective that I put together a short instructional book, but I believe it gets to the point and it gets things done. A 10-lesson tutorial on multiple opponent combat with single-handed weapons. And within this book, I even went to the trouble of including pictures both
Mm.
demoing everything with the right hand and demoing it also with the left hand, so that left-handers get a visual
Oh,
image
wow.
of
Okay.
how they need to perform. And so it's let me see, I've got it here. It's the as the camera
Oh, there we go.
like this. It's multiple opponent combat with 100 weapons. It's a 10 lesson tutorial. It breaks down this system, which obviously isn't rocket science. Nothing is except rocket science, right? And so I would advise people to start with this. And then for those who happen to be like into teaching, if they want to, if they have to teach themselves, if they are looking to teach other people, I did put together two like books on like learning on coaching. This one,
So, okay.
yeah, this one. So it doesn't analyze Jogo, but for example, for me to give you an example, as I was sharing with you guys initially, um, one of the things that attracted me in Jogo was that everything was partner oriented, and so the thing
Mm.
is that I can, for example, you open any book on motor skill, on learning motor skills, movements, and you very easily come across the diagram that states that input leads to processing and processing leads to output. But
Okay.
then how do you see most teaching occurring? You
Mm.
see instructors demoing a certain movement, and then you see trainees looking to replicate it, looking to imitate it, and as many times needed that so that they manage to make it automatic. But the thing is that as they are simply trainees are simply having access to the output. They are looking to imitate something that they see, the output,
Mm.
and obviously that they improve in it. Initially, when they began the process, they weren't able to perform those movements, and after one session or several sessions or several months, then eventually get to a point where they are able to perform the movement. But then
Okay.
they're able to perform the movement, but like in front of a mirror, not in combat. Why?
Mm.
Because they didn't get they didn't get become equally skilled in the
Yeah.
previous stages, in the processing stage and in the input stage.
Mm.
And then on top of that, but but it's like, but discussing the input processing to output process, uh, it's even like the first stage of questioning things, because the thing is that this is like assuming that you already have tools. Like for example, if if you see an opening, if, for example, if you're a kickboxer, you see an opening, this input, the opening that you see is the input from
Mm.
your opponent. You process it, and then you decide on whether you perform the jab or the cross or the hook,
Mhm.
or if you're a kickboxer, like the roundhouse kick or the front kick, whatever. But it's like, but then you go like, okay, but hold on, Luis, you are that makes sense, but you are assuming that he already knows how to jab, how to perform
I
the
already
cross,
know
the hook,
how. Mm.
whatever. And so, okay, once you get to that stage, yeah, you need to be able to analyze the input, to perceive the input in order to then be able to process it, and then so that you perform the output. But what about like the very beginning, when you don't even have the tools, and you need to develop them? And for that, I prefer to use I like to use this analogy. For example, I throw you your car keys for you to catch them,
Mm.
and if your car keys, so what the camera say, if your car keys are coming at you like higher than your shoulders, you catch them like this. But if your car keys reach you like at your stomach level, then
Mm.
instead of catching it like this, you turn you turn the hand like this, and you catch them like this. And the thing is that between catching your car keys like this, or catching your car keys like this, it's like when you do it, you aren't even aware of the decision between the two. You simply look at the car keys, and once again, like I said earlier regarding table tennis,
Mm.
you simply look at the car keys, and the car keys as if they had and your arm, your upper limb as if it had a brain of its own. It it
Mm.
it positions your hand accordingly. And just like if I throw you like a tennis ball, because it is small, you easily catch it with one hand. But if I throw you a basketball, since it's much bigger, it elicits a two-hand catching motion. And so this to say what? This to say that even in developing your toolkit, your new motor skills from the very beginning, your motor skills are not movement. Your motor skills, your movements are actually problem solving problem problem solving actions. And so when you perform when you're driving your car and you turn right, you don't think, oh, now I'm going to raise my arm like this and I'm going to do like this, so so as to move the steering wheel. So you are an actor who is experiencing a certain context. In this case, you are driving your car because you want to get home, and as you're going through as you are driving in order to get home, like you realize that you need to go around obstacles, and you realize that you need to turn left and right, and so what you perform is events. You think in terms of events, of the things you want to accomplish. You want to go around a bike, you want to turn right, you want to slow down, you want to speed up. You think in terms of events, and your body, which you weren't born yesterday, so you are already very familiar with your body, and you know how to move it in space. Your body then naturally moves in space in order to get you to perform not actions but those events. And so it's about, although as an outside observer, we only see the performance body moving in space, and that's what we're able to observe, and that's what we're able to describe. We can observe a performer performing, and you can say, oh, now he's moving his arm here, now he's moving his head here. Now, so as an outside observer, we observe performers' body segments moving in space, but the performer himself or herself is not thinking in terms of proprioception, is not thinking in terms of body placement in space. The performer thinks in terms of events. And in order to accomplish these events, he does things in order to do them. But like his software is not movement oriented, it is event oriented. And the event is is something that merges being in a context, having success criteria within that context, and then merging your own degrees of freedom with the traits of the target. And so obviously, like for example, if I see an open, if the kickboxer sees an opening to your head, but he's a beginner and he's not able to raise his leg over 90 degrees, then he's not going to kick you. He's going to punch you because the punches are the only degree of freedom that he has.
Right.
But if he improves his range of motion, then he's able to develop kicks, and then he's able to have more options to choose from. But then even like deciding between a punch to the head and a kick to the head might simply be a matter of distance, because the leg is longer. Like at this longer distance, I will kick him to the leg, to the head. If I happen to be a little bit closer, I'm not going to kick him. I'm going to punch him. Or I'm closer, but I really want to kick him. Then I need to distance myself first in order to position myself at the wider distance from where I want to kick him. And all this comes as a result of being skilled in being able to perform by being event oriented. And in this book that I wrote with Spiros Katsigiannis, was a very good friend who passed away. Unfortunately, he was also a very good martial artist, a systema guy whom Dragon knew also very very well. Within this, so this isn't a book on Jogo do Pau. This is a book on this perception action approach to understanding movement skill, which it has several designations within the motor learning community. It has the perception action. It's known as the perception action theory. It's known as the ecological learning approach. It's known as the dynamic systems approach to learning. But basically, it's a book on these on this philosophy on being able to think in terms of events and perform accordingly, so that instructors are able to teach movement. Instructors are able to start teaching movements by actually teaching events, and being able to do so in Jogo do Pau, in FMA, in basketball, in football, you name it. And then, as a complement, I wrote this book on physical conditioning, which is called Functional Physical Conditioning Made Easy: How to Plan Conditioning for Sport-Specific Results. Because for a long time I struggled with this. For a long time, I would sit in front of a piece of paper, and I would make a list of all the variables that I needed to train. And at the end, I would end up with a list that far exceeded my time, my availability to
your
train.
time, right?
Yeah, and sometimes and energy as well. But but even before I got to the energy part, the first obstacle was time. I was like, dude, no, you don't have time for this.
Yeah, I would get an anxiety. I'd be like, no way.
Yeah, and as this really puzzled me, and it was really annoying. Again, I thought about things. I analyzed, I read, I asked questions, all this stuff, and I eventually managed to reach a really simple system that allows people to more easily merge physical conditioning with sport specific practice. I'll give you an example. For example, even regarding overall approach, for physical, it's about looking or approaching physical conditioning as something that you undertake in order to improve your sport specific results. Okay, and so if you go to a strength training gym, and if you undertake strength exercises, strength training exercises that will not translate into any benefit for your sport specific practice, then you're just wasting your time. At least in terms of looking to improve your sport specific practice. Okay, if you have other goals, if together with your sport specific results, you just like to go to the gym in order to hang out with certain people, or you like to go to the gym because I like the feeling of lifting a weight in a certain manner. I know that it will not translate into anything. It will not add any benefit to my sport specific practice, but I enjoy doing it. Okay, then continue doing it. But then, because you have different goals, you have different motivations. You enjoy the pleasure that you experience from lifting a weight in a certain way. Cool. And if on top of that you are aware that it doesn't bring benefits to your sport specific practice, but you're okay with that, cool. But if you're looking to perform physical conditioning specifically to improve your sport specific practice, then you only need to perform to practice physical conditioning in one of two situations. Like I was saying earlier, I just mentioned the thing of kicking to the head and not having enough range of motion, active range of
Mhm.
motion to do so. And so it's like this. Like in the first stage. So in the first stage, you want, as an instructor, you want to teach someone to high kicks. And so it's not just about get them to learn to develop the proper coordination, as we just covered. Like they need a basic skill set. In this case, like the prerequisite skill set is for them to have the needed range of motion, being able to raise the leg to the needed height. And so if they're not able to do so, then just getting them to practice high kicks without having adequate range of motion, then they will just be wasting their time and eventually injuring themselves, because then if they don't have enough range of motion, as they look to raise their leg really high, they will rotate their waist forward. The pubic section of the waist will rotate forward. That will round their lower back. That will round their lower back through a ballistic stretch of the spine muscles. And after a few hundred or thousand repetitions, their lower back will go out. And then once it does, they will probably approach it as just like, oh, it was bad luck. No, it was bad luck because I had already done this 1,000 times. No, it wasn't bad luck. It was the result of 1,000 times stretching your lower back like this, because you didn't have the needed range of motion to raise your hip, your thigh. You didn't have the needed range of motion to raise your thigh without rounding the lower back. And so the first thing is, being a teacher, an instructor wants to teach a skill set, he needs to realize, okay, what are the prerequisites that people need to have in order to have the potential to learn this skill set. And in this case, for example, to learn high kicks, people need to have active range of motion of a certain level. If they don't have it, then they need to start by practicing strength training and stretching exercises to attain it. Once they attain that, and so that's the first phase of physical conditioning. The first phase is using physical conditioning in order to ensure that people manage to develop the prerequisites for successful teaching, for successful learning. Once they finish that stage and are able to develop their bodies in terms of either strength or active range of motion or stretching, whatever you want to call them, once they have those muscular skills to have the potential to learn, then you move to the second training phase, which is learning the skill set. Then you practice the skill set, and in this case, in this specific case that we are analyzing, they learn the high kicks.
Nice.
Then you get to a third stage, the third and final stage, which is you already know you've successfully finished the second stage, which was that you managed to learn to perform with proper coordination the high kicks, but now you want to perform them faster in order for two reasons. In order to limit the reaction time that that you give your opponent to react to your kick, but also because since it's a striking motion, striking, it's about kinetic energy, and so kinetic energy is the result of 1/2 times mass times the velocity square. And so if you're able to increase the speed, the movement speed that you attain while performing the kick, then you are able to achieve or to benefit from two results. You generate more velocity, thus you generate more kinetic energy. And if your goal is to be effective in terms of the art of hurting another human being, then that gets to the point or helps out. And at the same time, that increased movement speed also increases your chances of landing the kick, because you give your opponent less time to react. And so, an increasing that movement speed is not attained by simply repeating the kick 1,000 times. Then you need to, during a third stage of training, you need to employ specific conditioning exercises in order to improve the explosiveness of your muscles. Obviously, that speed is also attained through better coordination. But I'm already assuming that during phase two, during the phase in which you developed coordination, I'm assuming that within that second stage, you have already been able to max out or the improvement in terms of movement speed that you're able to garner to harness from improving your coordination. And so under that assumption that during stage two, in which you improved, in which you learned the actual skill in terms of coordination, you've already, and during which you improved, not you learned everything, and you were able to maximize, you were able to improve your targeting and also your movement speed. But you got to a point where you maxed out the improvements in terms of movement speed that coordination allows for. So when you get to that ceiling, then getting to a new ceiling boils down to improving the explosiveness of your muscle contraction, and so that's the third stage. And so basically, physical conditioning can be broken down, and so at the end of the day, instead of ending up in the situation that haunted me for several years, for several decades, which was that of looking at a piece of paper and going like, dude, like I do not have time to train like not even 10% of this. You get to a point where you go like, okay, this is actually doable. Like I use physical conditioning initially in terms of strength development and range of motion development in order to ensure that I have the prerequisites for learning the skill set. Then once I have that, then I learn the skill set. And once I've maxed out the results, the benefits that I can get from skill, from specific practice, then I include the third and final stage of looking to maximize muscle explosiveness in order to maximize output. And in this and within this stage, you look to maximize one of two outputs, either muscle explosiveness or endurance. And so within combat arts, it's mostly about for self-defense. It's mostly about maximizing muscle explosiveness. If within martial arts, earlier you mentioned MMA. If you happen to be an MMA fighter, or if you happen to be a boxer, and you don't, and so you're not practicing for the pavement arena, as Jeff Thompson used to call it. But if you're training for the gold medal, for a setting in which you might very easily have to fight for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, or whatever, then for that, you need to improve the ability that your cells have of manufacturing energy, of resynthesizing ATP. But basically that's it. During phase one, you look to improve strength and or active range of motion in order to have the needed muscle skills to learn the skill set. During stage two, you learn sport specific skill set, and during stage three, you look to maximize your output by maximizing either muscle explosiveness and or endurance.
Endurance. Okay. Nice. Wow. And so that's I don't know, that sounds like a great book. And so it sounds like, okay, so you got some books there on the art, and then some books kind of that far as individual training and self-improvement, far as goal setting and what have you. It sounds like, as far as physical activity and what have you.
Sorry, I lost you. Is there a question in there? So
yeah. So what I want to know is, in addition to what you just showed, you mentioned you mentioned some of the books you can't get through Amazon.
Initially, I did put together a book on pairing skill and another one on footwork, but currently those are no longer available. But right now, I am working on a book, or let's call it my Bible, that I expect to release around March, April next year,
Okay.
and it will cover everything. It will cover all the technique. It will
Mm,
cover tactics yeah, basically you name it, and I will be looking to cover everything and in a very detailed manner. Yeah, for dueling.
that's good. All right, we got a question just came in here from Glenn. Coach Elise mentions in his book, Jogo, book about the front knee over toes. Is that still true? Did he ever need surgery for his knee? So a two-part question.
Okay, so
About front knee over
the
toes.
first so the two-part question. The first part, or like the second part, I did have surgery on my knee, but because of a freak accident with inline rollerblades.
All right, so nothing to do with the knee.
Uh,
Okay.
no. While practicing something I was completely not skilled to practice, I was trying to take my first steps in inline rollerblades.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Ooh.
but like while simultaneously playing basketball, and so it's so uh, warning to the not so wise like me, don't play basketball, don't play basketball on inline rollerblades. It's a bad idea. It's a it's an ACL injury waiting to happen.
Had two of those. Not fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
not
so but
fun.
yeah but regarding the specific practice of Jogo de Pau, no. Within the practice of Jogo de Pau did not injure my knees. Um, and but I will share added information with Glenn. It's Glenn, right?
Correct. Yes.
Uh, yeah, which is as follows: like if you record someone running, and then if you play the footage in slow motion, you realize that as the body transfers from one foot to the other, and
Mhm.
there's always a moment in which, as you are transferring, in which the back leg has the knee going over the toes, and
Oh my
so our body can take the knee going over the toes.
God.
It's mostly the most important thing that you need to be careful about is doing exactly that, having your body going over your toes, not your body and then an additional load of 100 pounds or 200 pounds or 300 pounds or 400 pounds. Okay,
Mm.
but if it's just your body, and then it's also about how long it goes over your toes. And for example, which is the difference. And this, funny enough, even yesterday I was talking to a client about this. I have never, I don't think I've ever met someone who is afraid to perform static stretching. And it's very easy to look around and to see someone stretching statically. So
Mm.
holding a stretch for 30 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever you name it. But the thing is that let's imagine, and let's very easily compare the two. You move your you move your body in such a manner where like you squat, and as you are squatting, you allow for your knee to move beyond your toes. But you squat and you immediately come back up. And so did how long was your knee over your toes?
Mm.
Like less than a second. You
Right.
squatted down and immediately came back up. Now let's compare that with and even in that, if you do it with added weight, if you do it with added weight, uh, and you progress very slowly in the amount of weight that you add to your body,
Mm.
you can do it successfully without injuring yourself. And the empirical proof of that is that of Olympic weightlifters. You look at an Olympic weightlifter, and as they squat, their knees are way over their toes. Their toes. But then you have two things. One is that they only bring the weight up. They only explode up, and so they only perform the concentric part. Then they simply drop the weight. They don't go down eccentrically, going over the toes. And so if you compare that, the movement or the circumstance of the weightlifter who only performs the the, the upward motion to that of like someone performing a back squat, and in the back squat the person going down and then up, going down. So you perform both the eccentric and the concentric. And if you do that and you with added weight, then you increase the mechanical stress on the ligaments, on the joints. But still, if you do so by progressing very slowly, both in terms of amount of weight and in terms of overall load, if like if if like if you don't train, and if now suddenly you start training 7 days a week with added load, with your knees going over your toes, then that's an injury waiting to happen. But if you go from being sedentary to leading a sedentary lifestyle to doing so just initially like squatting with your knees going over your toes, you start doing it just with your body weight, like every other day or every third day. And then like after 6 months, then initially you go only every third day. After 3 months, you progress to every other day. After another 3 months, you do it every day. After another 3 months, then you start adding 10 pounds or 20 pounds. Then through this very progressive improvement or increase, this very progressive increasing of the load, the mechanical load that you are subjecting your joints to, then they have time to also strengthen the ligaments, strengthen the tendons, strengthen everything strengthens. But then going back to Jogo do Pau. In Jogo do Pau, first we don't as I'm fighting with the stick, I'm not squatting with the bar, so I'm not adding extra load on my body, and so it's just, and so that by itself makes it potentially safe because it's not a back squat, I'm not adding an extra load. And then secondly, and then just to finish before the thing I was thinking before, so for the most part, static stretches are actually way more dangerous because if you position your joints in a manner that they are like stretching ligaments, what's more dangerous? Stretch the ligaments for like half a second while you are squatting, or to stretch the ligaments for 30 seconds because you stay there for 30 seconds. Okay? And in Jogo do Pau, and so it's not static stretching. And although like you're always like in a squatting position, you're always constantly moving. And so it's like we're living proof, empirical proof that we actually do it, and we don't have these surgeries. And then the thing is that you really need to do it, to have maximum combat effectiveness. And because the thing is that for example, I can grab here a stick. I've got here a stick. Let me see here the camera. Where's the camera? Here. Yeah, the camera. Here. Okay. So like fighting is fighting. Everything is always the same. And so like for example, you perform here a side parry here, a side block. Like on this side in which I'm performing a side block, if I were to have to parry like the legs would entail a completely different parrying motion, like this to protect the legs, this to protect the head. And so because I have this issue of having to choose between the parries at the very fast, at maximum speed against random strikes. It's very difficult to distinguish between high and low and high and low blocks. And so, what does this mean? This means that if I use a side block like this without exiting, then I'm simply playing Russian roulette, because if I use a side block, like this, then if and without exiting upon being attacked, if the strike happens to be actually directed towards my head, then I block it. But if the strike was actually directed towards my knee, then I parry high, and the strike was actually coming low, and so I get hit on the knee. And so, due to the and this system is built under the premise of like you're a trapeze artist performing without a safety net, and so you're not looking to perform 10 exchanges and like constantly play Russian roulette by playing on the same spot and doing it like for 10 times, 10 exchanges, hoping that you get it right like 60% of the time and you win 6-4. No, like it's just like you're fighting to one point with the wooden sticks and without any body armor. And so it's like a trapeze artist without a safety net. And so you're going to, if you're going to wear to make a mistake, you're going to make a mistake on the side of being excessively cautious instead of being reckless. And this to say that upon being attacked, we'll look to merge both the block with the exit. But then what happens is that as we do that and as we block while exiting, in order to be safer as someone who is being attacked, I'm stepping away from my opponent's reach. And the thing is that if my reach and that of the opponent are at least fairly similar, it means that as I move myself, as I displace myself backwards, to step outside of my opponent's reach, that means that I myself finish the block at the distance from which I cannot reach my opponent in order to perform the counter attack. And so the critical element that will determine the effectiveness of my counter attack will be my ability to revert from a distancing step to a reapproaching step. Okay? Because if I distance myself, I block. And if I just parry from where I am and I cannot reach my opponent, I'm just striking to the air. And so I need to be able to revert. And so I need to revert from a distancing step to an approaching step. And so this means that as I'm stepping back, I step back in order to perform the block. But so I get attacked, I react by stepping back. Then as I am stepping back, I start here at this stage. I start performing the block. So as I'm stepping back, I start performing the block. But then as I finish the block and as the sticks collide, in that precise moment, I'm already moving my body forward. Okay. And so I perform the parry while already moving my body forward for two reasons. Because by doing that, just like I mentioned earlier, so kinetic energy is one half times mass times velocity squared. And the thing is that I have two variables in order to maximize kinetic energy, mass and velocity. If I perform a strike and if I swing a weapon, through a swing, I'm able to generate lots of velocity. And so I'm able to maximize kinetic energy when I swing a stick by maximizing the velocity of the displacement of the weapon. But now, instead of thinking of a swing, let's think of a thrust. A thrust is just this, okay? And so in a thrust, you just move your weapon just a very slight bit. And so during that very slight motion that you perform when thrusting, you're not able to generate much movement speed. So your velocity will always be very, 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 very limited. And so how do you maximize the kinetic energy of the thrust? By maximizing the other variable, the mass. And so instead of performing thrusts going backwards, you need to perform thrusts going forwards in order to use to put your mass, your body weight behind the strike. And it's the same thing for the parry. The parry, because you are reacting, So your opponent starts performing a strike, and then you react, and so it means that you're always one step behind. Because you're one step behind, that limits you the in terms of your movement's range of motion. So when you parry, you start with a weapon in a certain position, and it just like moves just a very slight bit in order to get to the parrying position. And so this means that your parries, just like the thrust, are never able to generate much velocity, much movement speed. And so for them to be solid, just like with the thrust, you need to maximize mass. And so when you are thrusting, you really like perform a passing step, and you move and you step forward. When you parry, your intention should be that of parrying while performing a passing step while going forward. But the thing is that you were moving backwards, and so the thing is that you stepped away, you were moving backwards, but as you finish the backward motion displacement, you want to finish the backward displacement and be already transitioning to the forward motion. And so by doing that, instead of instead of instead of pairing by having your body moving backwards as the sticks collide, you start by moving backwards, but then as the sticks collide, you are already looking to revert into a forward motion. And if you do that, you are pairing. Your parries become really solid because they have the forward energy of the body, and at the same time you are already like, and so like as you parry, your body is already like slightly being rocked forward, and it continues rocking forward, doesn't stop, because you want to reapproach with the counter attack. It has to be, you need to that movement flow in order to maximize the chances of your counter attack being effective. And so that means that as you parry with the goal of being already going forward, that forward displacement of your body naturally gets your joints, and in this case the knees, to be moving forward. Okay, but which is what happens when you run. You just like record yourself or record someone else while running. Like the knee constantly goes over the toes.
Yeah.
But the thing is that people don't go around running with 100 pounds on their back.
Yeah.
Okay, perhaps like some military people are known like for carrying like really heavy backpacks, and so probably it would make sense. It would be interesting to study those people to see if those people though eventually develop knee injuries from running with additional weight. But at least as regular folks who run around, who move around in space without additional load, and so it's basketball players, football players, baseball players, just like record anyone running, the knee is always going reaching beyond the toes. But the thing is that you're doing it without added load, and if you're smart, you progress very slowly in terms of your training regimen. You don't go from not training to doing it like 7 days a week, or 3 times a day. And so, like, if you do that, then you will injure your knee. And you may make a mistake of thinking, okay, I injured my knee because I started practicing something that gets my knee to go over the toes. No, you injured your knee because you went from being a couch potato to training 3 times a day.
Yeah. That's pretty much. I do want to play here. I pulled this from YouTube because I at least want folks to see. And what I'm going to do is, because of I'm not sure what's going on the internet here. In the comment section, I'm going to definitely share your Google stuff here. But this, I'm hoping folks can see this. Again, I pulled this from YouTube, so this should work. And folks, let me know if you can see this, please.
As a incentive, have your opponent on your side or weapon, in this case,
No.
right hand, my opponent,
Oh,
on my
okay.
left, he will take the lead and he will approach me a little bit sooner than that. And so
Right, I'm
as
hoping.
his opponent approaches me, I will preemptively attack him.
Yeah. So if you're
And
watching
of
this,
course,
let me know if you are
preferably
seeing
towards the
this.
joint, either
In
towards the
addition to
head,
hearing
towards
it.
the knees, or towards the elbows, hands, whatever fragile spot I see available. Now, as this other foe is approaching me, I do the same thing. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. And by
Yeah,
doing
you see
this,
your
I
knee,
perform.
as you mentioned. I see it. Okay. Oh, great. Okay. So
I
focus.
perform the initial engagement that we go and cover, during
Right.
which I
Basically,
steal
you're
the
using your
initiative of my
multi,
opponents,
but
and
you're seeing your
then
knee.
I
So you go
simply
here to
attack
catch.
continuously by keeping my opponent at a distance, and as soon as I finish the
Yeah,
second strike,
your
I
center
will
of
then
gravity has to
move
be
back.
displaced forward, and so you have no
One,
other
two,
option but to do
three, and
so.
four.
Yeah.
And if someone really commits to approaching you, you have to punish
Right.
them
You just okay.
immediately
Let me
in
lower
order to
that
defend
myself
your
here.
distance. So that is the first scenario that we've covered, that we're going to cover. From here, we steal the initiative from our opponents, and we keep them at bay. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. 3 and 4. If someone commits himself to really come in, we have to punish him as best as we can. If that doesn't happen, and since we are being the ones, this is yourself, since we are the ones who are exerting the greatest effort, 1, 2, 3, 4, as soon as we can, we make a run for it. So now, following the same training principle that we've already covered before, the baton plays like this, and now for training purposes, the opponent on the opposite side of the weapon will approach first, will steal the initiative from him, 1, and we will immediately follow through towards the other opponent and continue. 1 and 2, already looking behind. And I am attacking him, already looking behind. If someone really commits, you have to punish him to the knee, to the hand, to the head, somewhere where it will really be effective. And 2, and 3, and 4. And as soon as you can, you make a run for it because you cannot stay there indefinitely, exerting more effort, greater effort than your opponents.
Yeah, so actually that touched upon some of the stuff you're talking about as far as multi attack, how sometimes if you don't have the initial escape, how you use it to create one in that, depending on how many there are and what have you. And there's but two-handed, but definitely there's also, you're definitely showcasing that your transition with the knee going, over your toes and so forth. But I'm going to post the other Google ones there too. I'm trying to, there's some internet stuff going on here. I'm not sure why the other stuff was not able to come up, and I apologize for that. I don't know. I have to talk to Be Live and see what the hell's going on. But what do you, as far as future, like, what do you got? I know you mentioned you got the other, the book coming out, which is going to have all the techniques and tactics and all that. What else you got going on as far as like the system and future goals of it and what have you?
No, personally, I don't have anything going on as that. As far as those things, like I know that there are some other people who are developing uh, and who are really putting forth quite a really nice effort into making Jogo into like an additional combat sport. So like they have been developing adaptive gear like helmets and body armor and like
Oh,
pilot
really? Okay.
staffs. Yeah, and this actually like began with my instructor like in the 80s, and more recently it's getting like a stronger push, at least from one very interesting group training group here from Portugal, the Cascais group. They really focus on their practice on protected sparring, and they really try to make it into a competitive thing activity.
Yeah.
But in my personal situation, that like I'm in favor of that. I myself enjoy putting on some gear and free playing like that. I also enjoy free playing without the gear. But like
Mhm.
in terms of beyond my personal practice for my own personal growth and amusement, my thing is that of training methods. Like I'm gonna continue researching
Right.
training methods. Another thing that I believe also needs to be researched and put down in writing is that of skill analysis, because it's like I'm pretty fed up with instructors who simply whose feedback to their trainees is simply that of, okay, that was wrong, or you can do better, or
Mhm.
whatever, like something non-specific that is completely useless in 99.9% of the times. And so it's much more relevant for like instead of just like learn as an instructor, instead of just getting instructors to learn that like feedback needs to be mostly positive and not so much negative and all that stuff. Okay, and that's
Mhm.
a first, that's an initial stage. Yeah, I remember once one course I was taking, um, in which the lecturer put forth the challenge of us picking up a piece of paper on our next training session and just like write down like and like little stripes every time we started a feedback with no. And we were all like, okay, like we can do that, but like I'm pretty sure that by the end of the training session I will only have recorded like 3 or 4 stripes. And
Mhm.
to everyone's surprise, most people ended the training session with like 500 no's or whatever. And so most of the time, people even start with the feedback with, no, that's not right. No, that was wrong. Blah, blah, blah. And it's very important for instructors to, during an initial stage, to realize that they tend to make too much use of no and of negative feedbacks. And so it's very interesting, very useful to during the first stage for them to become aware of that and to transition to more upbeat and positive feedback. But then even within positive feedback, just saying like um, uh, cool, like go for it, like yeah, like continue putting in the effort. It's like okay, like continue putting in the effort, whatever, like that's useful, like as an encouragement, but um, it doesn't enlighten the trainee in terms
Mhm.
of what needs to be improved and how.
What specifically
And
needs to be addressed?
yeah, yeah, and so
Mhm.
I think it's very important, at least for it's very important and relevant for trainees and students to be able to have a framework of where to look at
Yeah.
when they are observing that students, if they should, and in each situation, in terms of each technique and each moment that the technique is being practiced, if they should look at the upper limbs, the midsection, the lower limbs, and
Mhm.
upon looking at the area that they ought to look at, and upon identifying something that diverges from the correct model, which you end up labeling as a mistake, why is that mistake taking place? Because
Right.
like simply pointing out the mistake, okay, you didn't do A, you did B. It's like for the most part, most trainees even realize that they performed the mistake. But if for some reason initially they weren't able to realize that they did perform that mistake, okay, you make them aware of that, and from the moment that you make them aware of that, then you don't need to reinforce them. Then like saying it like 500 more times. Again, you did A, you performed A, you didn't perform B. It's like yeah, dude, like you need a feedback more specific than that, and so you need to be
Yeah.
able to interpret as an instructor. You need to be able to interpret. the performance of your trainee in order to be able to reach beyond the diagnosis that something is wrong. You need to be able to reach beyond that in order to figure out what is bringing about that mistake, being able to understand the cause, so that then you are able to act on the cause. And like for example, going back to the high kicking example,
Mm.
for example, the cause might be insufficient is insufficient hip range of motion. And so if that's the case, instead of just like continuing the specific practice of the high kicks and then just like trying to motivate them, try to kick higher, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Then no, if you diagnose that the thing that is lacking is adequate hip motion, then you simply need to interrupt practice and get trainees to practice to improve their active range of motion. And so I'm looking forward to also invest quite a bit in putting in systematizing this pedagogical part of teaching in order to
Mm.
put forth a framework to help instructors improve their observational skills, their interpretation skills of their performers' actions, and then their corrective strategies, their teaching strategies. So my efforts will be directed towards everything which is teaching oriented,
That's
teaching
fantastic.
and
Wow.
teaching and understanding the skill set. Like I
Yeah.
said, like within this Bible that I'm going to put forth, I'm going to be analyzing timing. I'm going to be analyzing distancing. I'm going to be
Mm.
analyzing openings. And they go like, okay, so then you're going to be analyzing Jogo Paulo. I go like, dude, like if you want to label me with Jogo Paulo, okay, label me with Jogo
Yeah,
Paulo.
right.
I don't have a
Can't
problem with
think of
that. But
labeling.
it's like,
It's
but
movement.
but
So you'd
but
be
ti-
analyzing,
but
yeah.
timing is timing, distance is distance, and so it's like analyzing combat, analyzing skill set. So my thing will be that of I will continue analyzing skill sets in order to and then share my insights on skill sets then and to whomever they happen to be useful. And then as a complement, I'm going to continue analyzing and sharing thoughts on improving teaching skill. Those are my mission.
I think that's fantastic. Instead of, especially on the teaching aspect, to help improve folks not only relaying information, but what to look for, and far as
Yeah,
corrective, what they're correcting or assessing, and whether I think that's great stuff. What I did here is comment section. I put your website and your books. So, or let's
thank
see.
you, thank you.
Oh yeah, no, happy to do, and that, but yeah, so this is great. Again, I got it. We're almost 2 hours, man. This has been
Yeah, yeah, time flies. Yeah, I just
no,
noticed it
it's been
as
great.
well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But no, I really appreciate you coming on. I loved it. I love where you had to talk about the sports science, especially your last part here is your mission. I hope you let me know because I would definitely like to see what you come out with that as far as material. Uh, that would definitely
I'll
just,
be in touch. Yeah,
yeah,
I'll
I
be in
could
touch.
do that.
Thanks for being interested. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, no sweat. And but yeah, I'll have to thank Molly Powell as well for making the connection too. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but uh, but yeah, I appreciate you and thank you for coming on. And I hope you have a good rest of the night. And yeah, stay in touch with me, please.
I will. Thanks for the invitation. It has been wonderful talking to you.
Yeah, same here. All right, Luis, you take care.
Okay. Take care. See you next time.
All right, bye. All right, folks, that wraps up 352. And who is next? This Thursday, might be one between it. I'm not sure, but this Thursday, oh, definitely, I'm having the beat the crap out of cancer. So Nick Merchant, basically Dog Brothers, but I attended that one in New York, and it was just fantastic. Sparring with the guys, no ego, just an all-around great crew. So I'm going to be featuring them this Thursday at 7 p.m. Matter of fact, test runs Tuesday. In addition, check them out, the Quick Bits. They're getting pinned on FMA discussion. Anybody can do them. So if you have an interest in doing them, basically private message me, and I'll show you how to go about it. And it's pretty easy. so you can show your stuff. The vid should be like anywhere from 2 to 8 minutes or so on a central theme, tactic, technique, whatever. And lastly, Christmas raffle, 10 bucks a ticket. We just got a bunch of more items donated today. Jack Latour donated 10 Zoom lessons. Bram Franks knives came in last week. Brian Rodriguez donated a kudu. And I think some other things. But yeah, check them out. Again, that is all pinned in there. You just got to scan down. But all these mentions they're all pinned in FMA discussion. All right, folks, thank you. If you have not already, please like and subscribe to FMA Discussion, where all our monies received goes to charity. All right.